Hello there, welcome to Helmsley Castle History Around Us. This is going to focus on site evidence, so this presentation is very much going to hone you in on the different types of site evidence that you'll be able to use within the exam. Now, site evidence is absolutely crucial for Helmsley Castle. 10 out of the 20 marks will come from your use of site evidence, so it's really important that you've got that knowledge of what kind of site evidence you can use, and also, crucially, what kind of conclusions you can draw from that site evidence within your answers. So focus on physical site evidence and source evidence is crucial, okay? So in any of our presentations that we have, if it's boxed in yellow, that means it's site or source evidence. So here, for example, you've got the moulded jamb, which tells us about the chapel and helps us to reconstruct what the chapel might have looked like. And we can see the size of the chapel. We can see it's at the heart of the bailey, which suggests that religion was really important during this time. We've got the evidence of the East Tower there. Then next to it, we've got the debris, so that tells us the story, a very dramatic story of the slighting of the East Tower during the English Civil War. Now, in terms of archaeological evidence, in the 1930s, when unemployed labourers cleared the site at Helmsley Castle, they helped uncover lots of archaeological evidence. So we've got here, for example, fragments from Helmsley Castle of a 13th century green pot decorated with a face. We've got a number of keys found at the castle, including this example from the 14th century, locally made Rydal ware 16th century pot used for cooking. It's very much that domestic role of the castle. You can see there, for example. Here we've got detail from a finely carved wood partition between the two upper floor rooms of the chamber block. So that's very much dates back to the sort of Tudor time. So that shows the wealth of the changes that were made by Edward Manners when he built the Tudor mansion. Lots of objects associated with dining have been found, including small daggers to use at the table. Fragment from a glazed cistern used for holding liquids like ale have also been found on the site. So you can see those two there. So that again shows that domestic role, the idea of feasts. You've got Hambleton ware cistern from the 14th or 15th century. You've got little clues about sort of hobbies. So this large stone from Helmsley Castle, it's now in store, has been carved from the Nine Men's Morris board. So that gives an insight into medieval pastimes and hobbies. 16th or 17th century chamber pot from Helmsley. Green glazed roof tiles and fragments of glass have been uncovered at the site. Many of these come from the chapel, and we know from this that the chapel's floor was very, very decorative, had stained glass windows in it, for example, so lots of money was spent on that. We found lots of evidence of cannon shot found at Helmsley Castle, and the location of these suggests that during the Civil War siege, Parliament fired shot at the East Tower, the northwest defences and the south gate. We've got fragments in the 17th century of 17th century chargers, large serving dishes. They're good quality products that suggest a high standard of living. 2 hearth bottoms recovered from Helmsley Castle. The lower one has been sectioned to analyse its composition. So that tells us about, the fireplaces and things like that. And then 16th century plasterwork containing details of mermaids, dolphins and heraldry. Again, that ornate kind of plasterwork shows us the wealth that was there at Helmsley Castle with the Tudor mansion. We've got spurs found from the era of the English Civil War, so it tells us about the military history. Glass bottles for Atkinson's aerated water found at the castle, made in the town and embossed with an image of the castle. We've got a fragment of a wine bottle embossed with Feversham arms found at Helmsley Castle. So that shows a bit more sort of modern kind of things that have been left behind at the castle. We've got site evidence of the West Range and the Tudor mansion there. Again, not ornamental plasterwork. The fine fireplaces, for example, the wood panelling. We've got the site evidence of things like the Brewhouse and the Bakehouse that reflects the increase in population of the castle and the increasing domestic role in the 15th and 16th century. We've got the site evidence, as we said, of the chapel and the East Tower and the slighting of the tower, so that's also important site evidence for us to use as well. The South Gate, we've got the remains of the South Gate there, the inner drawbridge abutment, the outer drawbridge abutment, the location of the actual drawbridge itself would have been around there, and the posterns, which are the little entranceways, so that again tells us the story of Helmsley Castle. Evidence of the West Tower, so you can see inside there, you can see sort of things like fireplaces, for example, and when we do the sort of tour of the guide of the site video, we'll go into this in even more detail. Rubble from the slighting of the East Tower. We've got graffiti at the South Gate, for example, that can be seen. This one dating from 1630. Okay, and just a quick reminder that you can also get your assessment objective 3 marks by using historical sources as well. So we're just going to kind of run through and just remind you of some of the different sources that we've got. So when we're looking at the early castle and Walter of Spess, we've got St Ilrid's description of Walter of Spess, the Battle of Standard. We've got Sir Walter of Spess's speech to his English troops before the Battle of Standard. We've got the 12th century sermon by Abbot Ilrid of Revo, where he describes what makes a strong castle. So you can just pause them if you want to remind yourself of any of those. In terms of the era of the de Roos family, we've got the 14th century tomb effigy of what's probably William de Roos II at Temple Church in London. We've got the family crest of the 3 water bougies, which are the leather bags for carrying water, which have often got military associations. We've got the Inquisition records after the death of William de Roos III. We've got the image of King Edward IV overseeing an execution, and a reminder that Thomas de Roos III was one of the leaders of the Lancastrian army who was captured and executed following defeat at the Battle of Hexham. And then we know from a source that Edmund de Roos was not seen as, quote, of sufficient discretion to be able to take on his duties in terms of overseeing Helmsley Castle. So the estates were overseen by his brother-in-law, Thomas Lavelle. In terms of the Manners family, we've got the letter about the mason's work not proceeding very quickly in terms of the development of the Tudor mansion. We've got the letter from Elizabeth, Countess of Rutland, to the Countess of Bedford, talking about how the daughter of Roger Manners became a lady-in-waiting at the court of Queen Elizabeth I. And we've also got source 10 there, extract detailing the comfort sent to Roger Manners whilst he was put in the Tower of London after being involved in the Duke of Essex's failed uprising against Queen Elizabeth I, which just reinforces how wealthy the family were. We've also got the source there, an inventory that was carried out in 1636 of the castle. The castle was owned at that stage by George Villiers, the second Duke of Buckingham, even though he was only 8 years old at that time. But Catherine Villiers, his mother, Catherine Manners, remember, kept servants and some of her possessions there. Remember, the family still had control of Belvoir Castle as well, so that was still their main residence. The furniture is listed as old, suggesting the family don't spend much time there. We then got an engraving in 1850 of one of the upper rooms of the chamber block, as it may have appeared following the Manners family refurbishments. Yes, we've got some nice sources here on the English Civil War in the 17th century that we've looked at there, so you can just sort of see source 13. You've got the parliamentary newspaper, you've got reports from newspapers concerning the siege at Helmsley Castle, the letter from Thomas Fairfax, and then really important source 16, the propositions desired by Colonel Crossland, Jordan Crossland, concerning the surrender itself and what he wanted for that. Going further on, we've got photographs and paintings, for example, the Romantic Ruin, the children from the Wesleyan Day School, the photograph of the East Tower and the tennis court, showing that raised ground of the tennis court. And then other sources you can use, some of the photographs that appear in the Helmsley Archive of the castle, showing the restoration work. So all really, really useful sources for you to use. So just make sure that you are getting those historical sources into your work and that cite evidence, and that will really help boost your marks.